Good morning. It's great to see everyone. I know that I have told you I'm very excited about welcoming Eddie Shapiro to Macomb Solel Lakeside, and he's written a book, um, Here's to the Ladies. And as I told him, I'm fangirling about Broadway and all of that. Let me read you a little bit about Eddie. He grew up singing music from every cast album he could get his hands on and could be found on any given night at the theater. We may have to ask him later to sing. He is the author of Nothing Like a Dame, Conversations with the Great Women of Musical Theater, and A Wonderful Guy, Conversations with the Great Men of Musical Theater, as well as Queens in the Kingdom, the ultimate and gay lesbian guide to Disney theme parks. He's written exclusively for both magazines and websites. He lives in New York and Los Angeles, and he's coming to us today from New York. I'm going to put you in here now. La 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 la. Where am I? I'm allowed. I, okay, here we go. Okay, we're being transcribed. Now I'm going to pick. I am replacing the spotlight. Eddie, take it away.
Well, hi. Vanessa, you mentioned that you have questions, and I do like to say at the beginning to everybody that I do like to leave a healthy amount of time for questions because I much prefer to engage people than to lecture to them. But in general, I can start by saying, as thank you for that introduction. That first book, this one, Nothing Like a Dame, Conversations with the Great Women of Musical Theater, happened because, Ross asked me before, some of you might have gotten on, where I'm from, said, New York, and that I grew up watching theater from the time I was very, very young. And I was completely obsessed. I mean, as Vanessa said, I was memorizing every cast album out there. Sure, you can imagine it made me very popular with all the other kids. But
only when you sang it. Only when you
yeah,
sang
right.
it.
Yeah. They really loved that when I was doing Ethel Merman. Yeah. As I got older, I started going not just to shows, but to cabaret acts of the varying Broadway performers. And Barbara Cook in the 80s was particularly prolific. There were less Broadway stars in the 80s, where now everybody's got a cabaret act. But back then, Broadway stars pretty much stuck to the stage. Very few of them were doing cabaret, but Barbara Cook was doing cabaret. And for those of you who don't know Barbara Cook, she was the original Marion the Librarian. There you go, Barbara Cook. In The Music Man, and she was the original Cunegonda in Candide, and she starred in She Loves Me. She was Broadway's um, leading ingenue during the golden age of musical theater. And in her cabaret act, she would talk at length about being in the room where it happened, as it were, being in the rehearsal room, working directly with Leonard Bernstein and Rodgers and Hammerstein and Julie Stein and anybody named Stein she worked with. I would salivate at these stories. They were so wonderful and so rich. And I thought to myself, wow, Barbara Cook is getting up there in years, and really these stories should be committed to paper while she's still around. So somehow, I don't remember how, I got her home address and I wrote her a somewhat impassioned letter suggesting that we collaborate on her autobiography. And she responded almost immediately, no. But I thought about it, and I am nothing if not tenacious. And I thought, well, uh, Barbara Cook isn't the only person with a link to the Golden Age. There are many. And what if this book wasn't just Barbara Cook? What if she was only an element? And I talked to lots of people about their careers in theater. So I wrote to Barbara again, and I said, what if you were just a chapter? And to that, she said yes. So we were off to the races at that point because I had already interviewed people for magazines and stuff like Christian Chenoweth and Chita Rivera. So I was it was very easy to ask them. And once you have those people on board, then when you're writing to Angela Lansbury, you can say, well, Cheetah's doing it, Barbara's doing it, and it's sort of domino effect. And the the doing of it, the writing of these interviews. The goal was that I was writing, and the books are in Q&A format. They are conversations, and I was the goal was for the reader to feel like a fly on the wall, that they were getting to be in the room as I was having these career encompassing conversations with these people. And by career encompassing, I mean I first asked them, what interested them in the theater and when they got uh, bitten by the bug. And then we talked about their entire trajectory and every show that they did throughout their careers. And we were finished when we were finished. So some of these interviews took, 4, 5, 6 hours. Some took 15. And these women and then when I did A Wonderful Guy, the follow-up, men too, were incredibly generous with their time in ways that I could not have predicted. They were also incredibly candid. What I did for preparation, I never had to research what these people had done in their careers. I knew what they had done in their careers, or I wouldn't have chosen them to be in the book. Um, what I researched was what they had said, because I was not especially interested in repeating stories that had been told again and again. I wanted to make sure I could recognize an often told story and stay away from it. Like for example, Carol Channing. You can watch her tell Jack Parr on YouTube. You can watch her tell Jack Parr a story and then Johnny Carson the same story verbatim 20 years later. So I wanted to stay away from that kind of thing, unless there was a follow-up question to be had. So I was very thorough in looking at what had been said before, and I was hearing all kinds of things that had never appeared in print or on video before. That they were incredibly candid with me, and I felt privileged, really, really privileged that they were so willing to share and so open. And the other surprise that happened, well, there are a couple, but one, when one is plotting a project where you're going to get to sit across the couch from Elaine Stritch or Patti LuPone or Christian Chenoweth, there's what you would expect, right? And you're getting to indulge in that. I pretty much knew that Angela Lansbury would live up to reputation, and indeed, she served tea that I said I didn't want to have, but she insisted on serving tea. And Elaine Stritch was just as irascible and cantankerous as you might imagine, and Carol Channing was just as daffy. They did not disappoint in terms of expectation, but at the same time there were many people who surprised me. And one of the things that surprised me the most was I had a preconceived notion walking in the door that they all uh, were at a point in their careers, had all reached the pinnacle, where they were no longer had reason to be insecure about where they stand in the world of musical theater. But every single person, bar none, showed me in one way or another some form of insecurity. Audra McDonald, in fact, said to me, I asked her at what point, she sort of went, whew, I never have to worry about waiting tables. I know that I have made it in this business and I have a career. And she said, never. She said, to this day, I still wake up, the six-time Tony Award winner, Audra McDonald, I still wake up every day and wonder if today is the day that they're going to realize that I'm a fraud. And I thought, wow, amazing. Not what I would expect, but also that is the kind of thing that gives these people their humanity and their vulnerability. And perhaps it's what makes them great, right? That accessibility, that vulnerability. And of course, there's a picture of her as Rose. She's in Gypsy right now on Broadway and displaying exactly that. Of course, Ethel Merman belies that notion. Ethel Merman, I love this story, was asked once if she gets stage fright, and she said, "Stage fright? Why should I worry? They're the ones who paid." But um, but by and large, I think there's a vulnerability there that makes these people great. The other thing that I never saw coming at me when I did this was that I walked away with, as I mentioned, all kinds of stories, all kinds of anecdotes, all kinds of insight into what it means to be a performer as your passion and your living for the last 50 years. But I did not expect to come away with some pretty potent life lessons. And I'll share one just 'cause, um, that comes to mind. After I did this book, uh, I had the opportunity to interview Carol Channing. I invited her to participate in an event that I was producing at Disneyland and to do a Q&A with her at Disneyland. And so we did this Q&A, and at that time, Carol was 89, her husband was 90. And after we did this, the next day, we spent the day together at Disneyland Park. Now, if you've ever been to a Disney park, I'm sure most of you have, it's Times Square. It is busy. It is full of people all moving around in different directions. And when you're there with nonagenarians, you know, the thinking, at least my thinking, was you got to be careful, right? Because one jostle can be consequential. One misstep off of a curb can really matter. So I'm thinking we're going to have a nice, easy day in the park. Nothing doing. Carol and Harry wanted to do everything. And so we're riding all these rides. We're going on the Peter Pan ride on Small World. We get off of Peter Pan, and Harry, Carol's husband, is staring at the carousel. I hadn't planned on going on the carousel because it's a carousel. I mean, there's nothing unique about it. But he's staring. So I said, Harry, did you want to ride the carousel? That's Carol and Harry. Yep. I said, Harry, did you want to ride the carousel? And he said, I'm looking at it. So I said, well, then we should ride. So we go over to the carousel, and I'm thinking he's going to want, a bench. Harry wants a horse. So Carol takes a bench, and she's dutifully applying lipstick. But Harry wants a horse. He puts one foot in the stirrup, and that's as far as he can go. So I literally lift him onto the horse. But he could not have been happier up there. And I'm watching these people and thinking to myself, God knows what aging is going to look like for me. God knows what my mental state is going to be, what my physical state is going to be, what my attitude is going to be, my perspective. But I'm watching these people of limited capacity just drinking up life and doing every single thing that they can do, squeezing every ounce of juice. And I thought, I really want to remember this. I want to take this in to the extent that my attitude as I age is a choice. Please let me remember this. And that's like, those kinds of gifts, like I said, I never saw coming. And I feel so lucky and privileged to have had that kind of access, that kind of opportunity. Not to mention, I feel lucky and privileged to have been the chronicler for all of these people and been able to tell these stories. More than one of them, including Joel Gray. Joel Gray contacted me. Joel Gray wrote some of these people, several, Joel Gray being one of them, have written their own autobiographies. And Joel Gray came to me after his chapter came out, and he said, in many ways, you captured me better than I captured me. And I said, why do you think that is? And he said, because you didn't have the filter that I have on myself. So it's a privilege. And I feel really, really lucky to have had it. And by the way, a coda to that Carol Channing story. Um, uh, After we finished in the park, they had already checked out of their room at the Grand Californian Hotel, which is right next to the park, and their luggage was in my room. So I situated them in the lobby while I went up to get their luggage. It's an atrium lobby, big atrium lobby with a grand piano in it. So as I'm coming back down with their stuff, I can hear what's happening in the lobby. And the pianist has apparently come out for his set, and he has apparently clocked Carol, because just as I'm hitting the lobby, he starts playing Hello Dolly. So Carol, being Carol, it's like a Monday afternoon at 5 p.m. If you happen to be walking through the Grand Californian Hotel that afternoon, Carol gets up and start Jolly, you'll never go away. It's just singing the whole song in the lobby. If you just happen to be walking through, there she was. So there you go. Moments like that. But yeah, it was a journey, and that with that first book, I finished it and realized two things that A, as I said, the candor that they gave me was so wonderful, and that I really enjoyed doing this and had an aptitude for it. So I wanted to keep going. So that's why I did the one on the men, A Wonderful Guy, and now the latest one, Here's to the Ladies. And Here's to the Ladies gave me the opportunity to cover I don't want to say a different level, but um, to dig deeper. The first book has a lot of stars, big name stars like Angela Lansbury and Carol Channing and Audra McDonald and Patti LuPone. In the second book, there are less household names, and those stories are less often told because a lot of them are more contemporary. And I really felt again, lucky to be able to tell those stories. And in fact, stories, when the two books are side by side, to listen to Kelly O'Hara, for example, talk about being a soprano on Broadway today as compared to Barbara Cook 50 years ago, and how the world that they traverse, even playing the same roles, has changed side by side, makes for what I like to call a tapestry of just what it means to be in the world of theater. And with that, I do want to open it up to any and all of your questions. I know there aren't that many of you, so I hope you have lots of questions.
Well, I certainly do. And I did ask, so one of the people in this book is Jessie Mueller, who is a hometown girl. She
Right.
went to New Trier. So if you could just give us, a couple of minutes on her. I'm pretty sure I saw Beautiful. She was in the Carole King. I mean, she's amazing, and because she's from, Chicago, I took a special interest.
Yeah. Jesse Mueller actually is I mean, what a interesting um, career trajectory and what range. Jessie Mueller, if you saw her locally, she did a lot of work locally, and there she was playing things like Sarah in Guys and Dolls. Locally, Sarah is, of course, the soprano ingenue. Um, and yet, when she's doing a show like Beautiful or Waitress, there she is belting her face off in a completely different register and a completely different kind of character. Her range is extraordinary. But one of the things that I really love about Jessie Mueller, and Jessie Mueller really, really paid her dues in the Chicago area before she came to New York. And when she came here, she actually came because she was cast out of Chicago in the musical On a Clear Day You Can See Forever with Harry
Mm.
Connick Jr. And that flopped instantly, and she had every expectation of turning around and going back to Chicago. But even though the show flopped, she got a lot of attention and a Tony nomination.
Wow.
And Broadway wanted to hold on to her, and she stayed. But one of the things that I really, really appreciated about Jessie and talking to her is she really has no appetite for all of the trappings
Mm.
of being a star on Broadway. So, despite her Tony win and Tony nominations, um, things like going to the Tony Awards where you have to get a dress and you have to get hair and the party of it all and the celebration and what some people might expect, basking in the glory of your achievements, she finds all of that a distraction. She just wants to do the work. And especially, when you're Tony nominated and you're having to appear on the talk shows, you're on The View, or you're on the Tonight Show, or whatever else. You're going to luncheons, you're going to the drama leagues, all the whole award season circus. You're also performing 8 shows a week, and in shows now, the leading ladies, particularly, are asked to do so much. Waitress and Beautiful, the leading woman has like 19 songs. So going to doing all of that stuff is so much extracurricular, and it's exhausting, and she is one who just wants it to be done because she just wants to be able to focus on the work, even though she appreciates the appreciation and the attention. um Funnily, her most recent Broadway musical, she did a play, but her most recent Broadway musical was Carousel. And I asked her about doing Carousel, and she said, even though she was the leading lady, Julie Jordan, she said it was a breeze because the way that show and older shows are written, she had three songs. So she's singing a few songs and she's got time off backstage, unlike Waitress, where she's on stage the entire time singing at the top of her register. The way shows are constructed these days, since American Idol, since Wicked, where they're asking performers to sing all the time, belting at that upper register. It's very taxing and very different from the way it used to be.
All right, Ross.
Yeah, actually, just picking up on something you just said and about uh, shows being constructed as more of sort of leading person featured. Can you just talk a little bit about over the last 30 years? I mean, the sort of some of the Disneyfication, like all these Disney, The Lion King, and all the sort of shows of, I don't want to say they're original, but they're also derivative. And can you talk about how the performers, are they enjoying that? Do they really want the new material? I mean, obviously the revivals, the carousel and what have you are wonderful. Like for the performers, what do they feel about the state of the material actually? I get the economics of it all, and we see the same in the film industry. It's sort of go big or you've got to be really small and self-finance. How do the artists, the actors view the current state? What's your view?
There is not they are of course not monolithic. They don't all think the same way. But Kelly O'Hara is actually a great example of somebody who very conscientiously, she knows that what she's going to be able to most satisfy her audiences with are The King and I, Kiss Me Kate, My Fair Lady, South Pacific, the classical canon. She is a perfect person in today's can cadre of performers to issue those roles, to essay those roles. But she also very consciously wants to mix it up, and almost she tries to do like every other show, um, is developed new material. So right after she did Kiss Me Kate, she did Days of Wine and Roses, with a very challenging score by Adam Guettel. And of course she's as well known for South Pacific as she is for Light and Piazza, also by Adam Guettel. She very much cares about developing new work, and she cares about, for herself, for her own artistic self, having the opportunity to experiment musically. And at the same time, she loves those roles. She loves Nellie Forbes. She loves getting to play Fiona in Brigadoon. So a mix. And same with, I mean, if you look at Audra McDonald's career, which has some incredible. I mean, her least well known, but probably up until now most ferocious role was in Marie Christine, where she played that's a musical version of Medea, and brutal new. But right now she's playing Rose in Gypsy, because how do you say no to the King Lear of musical theater roles? So it's a mix. There is a documentary that covers some of the ground that I cover. It's called Broadway: The Golden Age, and it talks directly to these people. And the last moments of that documentary show Tommy Tune saying, "I hate all of these revivals. That these theaters should be taken up with new work, moving the art form forward, and we clog up the theaters with these revivals instead." And that's followed immediately by Elaine Stritch saying, "I hate it when people say there shouldn't be revivals, because the revivals are the, of course I'm misquoting, but they show the next generation what a musical looks like, what the structure of a good musical, how it works, how dance and singing and acting all interplay. And by the way, I think that that particular art form, a really well-crafted musical, that is an endangered species. The show that I saw last night, I saw Smash last night, and I will say of Smash that the creators all know better. And I was shocked. I was thinking, you all have worked on great musicals. You've been in this business for a long time. How do you not know that the songs need to actually matter? They can't just be throwaway. They need to be filled with emotion. How can you structure it this way? Um, my 2 cents.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, Susan, go ahead.
Um, Hi, Eddie. I've really liked your presentation. Um, so Kelly O'Hara is going to be at Ravinia with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra this summer, and she's going to be with someone by the name of Sutton Foster.
Mhm.
I know nothing. I've never heard that name before, and I'm wondering if you can
Who
tell us.
Sutton Foster is?
Yes.
Sutton
Hey, and
Foster.
let's not just go for the gossip, Eddie, because we could go right there, right
No, this
exactly
isn't
there.
gossip at all. I mean, what Vanessa's talking about is the fact that Sutton Foster is now dating Hugh Jackman. But separate from that, her co-star in The Music Man. But separate from that, Sutton Foster is actually a very big name in Broadway. She not only a big name. I mean, she's done and she is a chapter in that first book. She has a legendary launch in the same way that Shirley MacLaine, the understudy in the Pajama Game, ends up being discovered and getting a Hollywood career. Sutton Foster, when she was doing Thoroughly Modern Millie out in La Jolla, she was the understudy. And they were having trouble with the leading lady. They moved her up into the role, and Sutton Foster became a star and won a Tony Award for Thoroughly Modern Millie. And most recently, that picture on the right, that's her this season in the Carol Burnett role in Once Upon a Mattress on Broadway. And then she just did it in Los Angeles. And she also was with Hugh Jackman in The Music Man. She did Little Women. She won a Tony Award for Anything Goes, which she started with Joel Grey. So her career, she starred in The Drowsy Chaperone and Young Frankenstein. She is one of the preeminent leading ladies of Broadway right now. But the show that you're going to get at Ravinia that she and Kelly are doing. They did it at Carnegie Hall last year. They are in the tradition of Carol Burnett and Julie Andrews and those variety specials because Sutton is a big belter like Carol Burnett and Kelly is a soprano like Julie Andrews. They are trying to bring back that format. And in fact, they do one of the medleys that Julie and Carol did together. So I highly recommend it. If you don't have tickets, Susan, go get them.
I definitely am going to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, it makes me want to go see it too. We also had a question. Did you ever interview Barbara Streisand?
I did not. And aside from the fact that I'm quite certain that had I asked Barbara Streisand would not have been interested. But I actually set a criteria for all of these books that I was talking to people who had a career in musical theater, not just people who even performed greatly in musical theater. So Barbara Streisand, who did essentially 2 shows and left for Hollywood, I don't really consider her someone with a career in musical theater. That's exactly why I didn't chase after Carol Burnett or Liza Minnelli, even though Liza's done more. Still, she's best known for work outside of the Broadway arena, or somebody like Glenn Close, who's done a couple of Broadway musicals, but best known elsewhere. I was really sticking to people who not do Broadway exclusively. I mean, particularly now, lots of these women, including Audra McDonald, BB Newirth, do television, but the bulk of their work is still on the Broadway stage. So that was the criteria I set for myself arbitrarily.
Evie wants to know, how did you choose who to interview? And if you were turned down, how did you respond? Ooh.
Well, the latter is easy. I wept. But, who I chose, as I just said, I was the criteria was that you had to have a full career in musical theater. For the first book, because I knew I wanted to do, as I said, these career encompassing conversations, and I knew they were going to run long. I knew the publisher would not want a book the size of the phone book. So I limited it to people who had Tony Awards. That was a way to call the herd. And then, of course, uh, when I asked, they had to say yes. If they didn't say yes, then they didn't get to be in the book, strangely. Um, uh, the few people who did turn me down, I mentioned before that I'm tenacious. So, Patty LuPone turned me down 7 times before she said yes. So I did keep chasing these people. But there are a couple who got away for varying reasons. One of two, actually, there are 2 chapters. I have a chapter on Christine Ebersole that is done, and a chapter on Andrea Martin that is done. And both of them asked not to be included for different reasons, personal reasons. Not because they didn't like the chapter, but because they had other stuff going on. But Bernadette Peters, she to me is the holy grail of the ones who got away. She initially told me that while she appreciated, what I was doing, she's like, I don't like talking about myself. If you were doing a book about animals, I'd be very happy to talk to you. But talking about myself, reflecting on my career is not really what I do. Um, and I went to her multiple times. I delivered dog biscuits. I delivered cupcakes. She kept saying no. And then when I did was doing the new book, she finally said yes, and we scheduled it. And then 2 days before we were supposed to do the interview, she canceled. Um, and I've subsequently seen her, and she said, I really do like your books. So it isn't personal, but it's just not for her. But that to me is the holy grail of the ones who got away. And
Okay,
the-
I was
in the
thinking about her. I was like, where is she?
yeah,
Bill Rosen says, Eddie, this is a wonderful presentation, which I echo. What are your 3 favorite Broadway productions of all time? I know this will be like choosing your favorite child.
yeah,
And,
that's Sophie's choice.
and he wants to know and why. No pressure, no pressure.
Sophie's choice. Um, I'm gonna give you 4 randomly, and I can't even say that they're my all-time favorites. They're just the ones that come to mind. Um, I think sometimes that your favorite anything has everything to do with when you're exposed to it. And I think that the magical age is right around 11 or 12. And I think that because I think at 11 or 12, you're old enough to understand and appreciate what it is you're taking in, but young enough that you don't have a rest of your life and you can obsess about that thing and think about nothing but that thing. So for me, when I saw the original Michael Bennett production of Dreamgirls on Broadway, that was the thing that I was completely obsessed about. I had never seen such integration of music and staging and acting and it all coming together perfectly in a musical. So even though it's not certainly the best music ever on Broadway, it was the perfect theatrical experience, and to me it still is. And again, Michael Bennett's a chorus line, because it is a chorus line and because of course it speaks to the thing that I love. But of the classics, I really, really love My Fair Lady. I love the construction of that piece. Um, and even though it's somewhat flawed, every time I see Ragtime, I weep. I think Ragtime is also so ambitious and has so much to say and says it and integrates so well. So, yeah, those are some of my favorites.
I put into the chat where you can get Eddie's book, or you can go to your local, um, the bookstall or somewhere around here. If you don't want to go to Amazon, it's a great book. For those of us in Chicago, when we can, we come to New York and we do go see theater, but what would you see on theater tomorrow? If your friends are coming in from Chicago, they can only see 2 or 3 shows. What should they go see? I know again, it's like, you're picking your favorite child.
It's not that so much. It's a question of who am I talking to,
Yeah.
right?
Okay,
Um,
how about this? What do you think is going to be nominated for best musical in the Tonys? How about that?
what I was actually thinking about this last night when I came home from Smash, wanting to smash things. Um, I was thinking about what I think is of the contenders, what I think is likely to be nominated, and what I think is likely to win. And I I think the winner this year, although there are still a couple of things that have yet to open and we don't know, but so far of what's open, I think that this is another one of those years where the little unknown, unheard of underdog is going to take it. There's a musical called Maybe Happy Ending, which stars Darren Criss, who is wonderful in it. And improbably, this show is about two robots. They are robots, but it is a magical, beautiful love story. And every time those kinds of shows, you, Ross, talked about the Disneyfication of Broadway and about, and I think you don't just mean the Disney musicals, although there are plenty of those. I think by that you also meant, you know, Tootsie and Rocky the musical and Back to the Future the musical and
Correct.
Beetlejuice. There's too
yeah,
many to name.
all of the shows that are trading on a brand rather than original material. And of course, the other thing that sometimes happens if you're not trading on a brand or trading on the source material, you're trading on a composer, right? So these days it's the Neil Diamond musical, it's the Carole King musical, it's the ABBA musical, or you're trading on star power. Um, uh, in this case, I mean, Darren Criss is a star, but I don't know that he's a star that would necessarily be selling out theaters for years, not like Hugh Jackman. But this show, like Kimberly Akimbo, like Dear Evan Hansen, like The Band's Visit, like Come From Away, little shows that are pack such a wallop emotionally, and really do what musicals can do best. I think I would send people to go see maybe Happy Ending. Ross mentioned Oh Mary, and Oh Mary is not a musical, but Oh Mary is another little show that could, you know, nobody heard of anybody involved essentially, and it is so funny. Um, and then musically, just I mean, if for friends who appreciate camp, even though it's flawed as hell, I mean, it's just not a perfect musical, but Death Becomes Her is really funny. And sometimes, more often than not, funny is not done well. This is really, really laugh out loud funny.
Hmm.
Yeah, those are the musicals I might recommend right now.
Okay. Wendy asked, have you ever seen some of these actors phone it in since they have to do so many performances a week, a day? Or any bloopers? Best blooper you saw?
Seen tons of bloopers. Never, ever, ever seen anybody phone it in. And I mean, on Broadway. And the reason I think is evident. I think that every single you don't get to be on Broadway if you don't have an appreciation for the fact that there is millions of dollars at stake on what you're doing, and that there are tons of people out there who are coming for the role that you're in, and you're damn lucky to have it. Even if you're a star, one of the things that I so appreciated hearing from Idina Menzel, when she was doing the musical If Then, which another one of those shows where the lady is asked to sing a lot, um, and you know, a year, and people get sick, people get colds, especially when you have a kid at home, which she did at the time. She talked about how on the chat boards and on social media, you could get trashed for, oh, she didn't hit the note tonight. That's on the far right, that Redwood, that's what she's in right now on Broadway. But uh, uh, that she could get trashed for not uh, for cracking, or for not necessarily hanging a note because she might have a cold, she might have a cough, she might have a sinus infection. And she said there are actors who won't come in, who will call out sick if they're not going to deliver perfection. I think it's far more important if people are coming to see me. I think it's far more important for me to be in the room, to show up and offer what I've got. And what I've got might not be hitting the note, but I'm still interpreting the material. I'm still acting through it. I'm still delivering. And understand, and that's all part of humanity. And I really appreciated that perspective. That excellence on Broadway need not necessarily mean, yeah, I'm hitting the G. It means showing up with all that you've got and not phoning it in. Um, so that was the phone. Oh, and then the other question was bloopers. Yeah, I've watched people mess up. I've watched people crack up on stage. And of course, it's delightful when it happens. But I can't think of a particular instance, although it may come to me. So,
Do you think the last 5 years with Nick Jonas will be popular?
do I think it will be popular? Sure, because I think the last 5 years has a very big following and has developed a big following over the years, and I think Nick Jonas is popular. But if if I was a producer and being asked to invest in this show, and I was thinking it through, I think, well, here's Adrienne Warren, who is playing the female lead, and she is a wonderful actor. She's really, really a fine actor. And here's Nick Jonas, who is a pop star who is yet to demonstrate any acting chops of any discernible note. That doesn't mean he doesn't have them, but I've yet to see him show us that he can act. And this is a two-hander where with a lot of pathos. And we'll see.
There they are. Um, the Schuberts have commented a couple things, but that they saw Maybe Happy Endings, absolutely loved it. Magical Age at 11 or 12, seeing Patti LuPone at in Gypsy at Ravinia. That's really that's really local to Highland Park. And they also commented that classical musicals tended to have showstoppers, especially at the end of Act One. Do modern musicals suffer because they frequently don't have a standout showstopper?
Oh, I think they do. I think an Act One closer is still absolutely de rigueur. I mean, maybe not every single show, and maybe not every single show achieves it, but I think the Act One closer is still pretty important. Last night at Smash, even as flawed as that show was, boy, did they bring down the Act One curtain appropriately. Although to me, the very best Act One closer, can you top One Day More from Les Miserables? Where every single character gets their intentions out and they're all singing and they're all driving it. Come on. Doesn't get better.
Well, listen, funny girl, don't rain on my parade. Come on.
Yeah, funny. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm with you. I'm still voting for Les Mis, but I'm with you.
Did you interview Anne Ranking?
I did not. And Anne Reinking was on my list, and I had actually reached out to her for the second book, and she passed before we had the opportunity. But I very much would have liked to.
Okay.
I mean, I've interviewed Anne Reinking. I interviewed her for a magazine when she was doing Fosse on Broadway. I got to sit down with she and Gwen Verdon together over lunch, and that was memorable. But I didn't get to really delve into her career.
Out of all the people you've interviewed for your books, for your magazine, who really surprised you or, was just, you know, something unexpected?
Yeah, there were a few because, as I mentioned earlier, some people were exactly what I expected them to be. But a couple of surprises. BB Newworth. Um, Two things about BB Newworth. A, BB Newworth is incredibly cerebral. And I had not thought of her. Not, it's not that I had reason to think that she was dumb or anything, but I hadn't thought that she was quite so not just intelligent, but she's really precise with her words, really precise. And she will sometimes speak in the way that I'm speaking right now because she's searching for the perfect word. She doesn't want to be misunderstood. And when you think about it, BB Newworth is best known as a Fosse dancer. What is Fosse all about? Precision. So it makes sense that what she does physically and how she wants to communicate that they are matched. I just hadn't thought about it. The other thing about BB Newirth that really surprised me, and this is true of Patti LuPone as well, both of those artists have a bit of a reputation. They are known to sometimes be, I'll use the word diva, although that's it feels sexist to say use the word diva, but I think
Oh, no, I use it with men as well.
okay, so colloquially, you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
Um, uh, uh, but
I use it with anyone who can sing, and I won't get into the Jewish person who does that in a synagogue, but that's
fair
where I
enough.
use it.
Fair enough. Um, but both of those people, and with BB particularly, I have had repeated and extended contact since the book over the years. And she is always, always, always completely lovely with me, kind, generous, thoughtful. And that's not to say that in both cases, she and Patti LuPone, if I were working with them on a musical that wasn't working and I was perhaps not pulling my weight, could I see a personality that might flare and show its short-temperedness? Yeah, perhaps. But that doesn't mean that in a different context, um, these people aren't lovely. Patty is another great example. Patty, Patty did step into Patty LuPone's homes. I was in both of her homes. There's nothing on display. There are no theater
Yeah.
posters, no awards, no props. There's nothing that says, I'm a great star. Unlike, by the way, Carol Channing, you walk into Carol Channing's office and floor to ceiling framed 8 by 10 pictures of Carol and everybody who ever lived. So it's Carol Channing and Richard Nixon, Carol Channing and Walt Disney, Carol Channing and Marlene Dietrich. I mean, it's like, a whole, it's American history on the walls. Patti LuPone, nothing. And I asked her about it and I said, there are no sort of theatrical memories around her. And she said, that's for the theater. I cross over the stage door and I leave all of that there at home. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I have a dog. It's a whole different life than what you might imagine. But she too, very kind. I mean, she baked me bread. She, had her very no diva pretensions about her. And I think context is everything. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I saw Carol Channing with my sister and my dad in Chicago, and so I've always had and it's probably at the magical age, and have always had a special place in my heart. And everything you're saying, just makes me, like her even more. I would be remiss if I did not say, what book are you working on now? And then maybe when you get that book out, we're going to have you come to Chicago because we could sit and talk to you for hours.
Well, I'll tell you, um, I'm not working on one right now, although I'm ruminating on one. And my publisher's very eager for me to do a next one, but
I'm sure they are.
well, that's kind of you to say, but that, you never know. I really am interested. Remember, it all starts with Barbara Cook and wanting to capture stories while they're still around. Um, John Kander is 95 years old and still very much with us, and very much present. And I thought, okay, those are other stories I'd really like to capture. So what if I'm actually talking now to creators? And because I don't have Harold Prince anymore, and I don't have Stephen Sondheim anymore, but there are other great creators. So I'm thinking about that. Yeah, John Kander,
Yeah.
who is, by the way, generous enough to give me a blurb for this book. He said, a fascinating and remarkably authentic collection of conversations with theater aristocracy. Thanks, John.
Yeah, he seems really interesting. Um, can you, this is for the synagogue. Can you share with us any just feelings or whatever you have me be about some of the Jewish people you've interviewed, Joel Gray being in Cabaret. Uh, I'll
Yeah,
let fill in the
I,
blanks. What
I,
stories you got for us there?
I'm regularly asked to connect to Judaism, other than, of course, my last name being Shapiro.
Right.
And of course, the obvious that, who's going to the theater if it's not us? But and who's writing theater if not us? And in fact, I was asked to write an article about Jews in musical theater, and I had not even realized until I dug into it that literally, well, not literally, almost literally, every single composer you can think of, with the exception of Cole Porter. They're all Jews, not just some of them Jews. They are all Jews.
Yeah.
What the hell? And I'm regularly asked, well, why? I don't have an answer to that any more than I know why gay people like Barbara Streisand. I just know it to be true. But why? I mean, lots of theories about, well, if you are sort of living in a world where you see yourself as having limited opportunities, and you see what Irving Berlin and George Gershwin did, maybe you think, oh, okay, I can do that too. Or maybe even if there's such a thing as Jewish mafia, and these are the people who talk to one another, right? Then who are your peers? If you're Leonard Bernstein and your peers are Betty Comden and Adolph Green and Jerome Robbins, and you all want to do stuff together, then before you know it, the Jews are owning the business. Maybe. Yeah, theories. But in terms of the performers, I really appreciated talking to people who, in fact, all of the Jews I talked to uh, really do own their Judaism. Adina Menzel, obviously in keeping the name Adina Menzel, makes a statement right there. But she was a bar mitzvah singer on Long Island before she ever was performing. And even though her roles haven't necessarily skewed Jewish, in fact, she's best known for being a Nordic ice queen in animated form, but still, she owns her Judaism. Joel Grey, of course, came up in the Yiddish theater, but the one who is perhaps the most interesting to me in terms of just getting to play a lot of Jews is Judy Kuhn. Judy Kuhn is probably best known as the singing voice of Pocahontas in Disney's Pocahontas, and she was also Cosette in the original Les Miserables, not a Jew. However, right before that, she was in the musical Rags, which is by the creative team who wrote Fiddler along with Stephen Schwartz, and she played a woman who died in the shirtwaist fire in the
Oh,
Lower East Side.
Triangle. Yeah.
Yeah. And yes, that's Judy Kuhn. And most recently, she's about to be off Broadway in a play set in a synagogue. She just did I Can Get It For You Wholesale, the show that Barbara Streisand made her debut in. And she's played Golda on Broadway and in the West End. She's stepped into a lot of Jewish roles. And uh, she told me something very interesting. By the way, that right in the middle, just in time, that is her album of Julie Stein songs, and it's extraordinary. I highly recommend it. Her voice and his music, it's highly recommend that album. But uh, she talked to me about her father having been a civil rights lawyer and an activist, and somebody who really cared about social justice, and that she started to feel frivolous in pursuing musical theater. That, here he is changing the world. Here I am, singing show tunes. Um, and he said to her, it's good that you have a little guilt about that. It's good, but it's what you can offer. It's what you do. It's what you excel at. So you should excel at it while you stay aware of your privilege and while you stay aware of having a little guilt about it, which I appreciated, and I thought more about it. I thought more about what actors actually do. And actors are nothing if not in service. Actors are in service to the text, they're in service to the director, they're ultimately in service to nightly audiences. They are giving of themselves, of their entire bodies, of their entire instruments. It's tzedakah. You are in service for your entire career. So I talked with her about that, and she agrees that her sort of Jewish culture plays into very much what she brings to the stage. Same with Judy
Uh,
Kaye, by the way, who played Emma Goldman in Ragtime, and Judy Kaye, who most famously, has a Tony Award for playing Carlotta in the original Phantom of the Opera, not Jewish. But when she got to dig into Emma Goldman in Ragtime, she really felt like, oh, now I can dig into, my kishkas.
there's just so many people that, wait, got a picture of Judy Kay here. Um, it's just also interesting to me, to us. I'm sure it's to us. Um, Eddie comes to us through the Jewish Book Council, and I don't want to say you were the first person I chose
Aw.
to come speak to us because it speaks to me. And you know, I have great memories of going to the theater and to continue to go to the theater. Um, and Abby says, so appreciative hearing the authentically behind the glitz. And thank you. So please, read the comments. We're all thanking you. We're getting towards the end of our time. Oh, you got a clap from Ross. It just, going to the theater is a feel good. Um, I'm looking forward to the Tonys this year, as I do every year. And with things kind of swirling around us, this is something and somewhere where we can feel good. So.
Yeah, and Vanessa, to your point, I saw Kelly O'Hara. Susan, this one's for you. I saw Kelly O'Hara in Los Angeles in December. Yeah, probably December. Just do a solo concert at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, and whatever was going on that week was particularly egregious politically. So I was feeling the malaise of just, oh God, waking up every day, and facing what we're facing. And then she did her thing, and I was talking to her afterwards, and I was like, you're not even aware because you're just doing what you do, but how badly we need to not just the distraction or being taken away, because that's true, but simplistic. We need artists who help us feel things, and help us tap into our humanity, that remind us that there are other things in the world other than mass deportations and dismantling of the government. Yeah, the arts
Yeah.
matter.
You're gonna make me cry, but um, I think we all need to be reminded of that. And it was just a great session. And if you're in Chicago, let us know. But when the next book comes out, maybe we can bring you to Chicago because we would just like to sit and talk with you in person, grab a cup of coffee. I won't make you tea like Angela Lansbury, but right.
I'll tell
And
you, I came to Chicago last year because after I did this book with Faith Prince's and the newest one, and she was doing Boop in Chicago, and she invited me to come. And I thought, well, if Faith Prince is inviting me, I have to come. And I hadn't been to Chicago for years, and I loved it. I'm happy for you all that you're in a city with such rich opportunities to go to the theater.
thank you. Thank you. Um, I do have a couple of announcements for my people. Tomorrow night, Rabbi Mafik is talking about from Sign to Society, and he's talking about AI. And then Tuesday, we have Alden Solovey, who has poetry in Israel. Both are in person and virtual. If you need any links, see me. Eddie, we can't thank you enough, and we'll be in touch, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks so much for being here today, guys. Have a lovely Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.